All right, imagine being completely uprooted and thrown into the heart of the absolute most dangerous desert planet in the known universe, armed with nothing but a terrifying prophecy. Today, we're doing a full narrative explainer of the epic, continuous journey of Paul Atreides across the unforgiving sands of Arrakis.
We actually kick things off right through the eyes of the native Fremen. There's this thought from Chani that just perfectly nails a really tragic paradox. You know, she talks about how Arrakis is breathtakingly beautiful when the sun is low, yet it is constantly being ripped apart by outsiders. These colonizers are essentially racing against the clock to strip the planet of its wealth. They rule with absolute cruelty, leaving the Fremen to just kind of sit there and wonder, okay, who is going to oppress us next? Especially after the Emperor suddenly boots the brutal Harkonnens off the planet.
Now, to really wrap our heads around all this bloodshed, we have to talk about the spice. I mean, think of it as the ultimate cosmic crude oil, but honestly, way more powerful. For the local Fremen, it's this deeply sacred, health-giving hallucinogen. But for the wider Imperium, it is literally the only thing that allows the Spacing Guild navigators to find safe paths between the stars. Without spice, interstellar travel just stops dead in its tracks. So naturally, controlling Arrakis puts a massive, incredibly dangerous target on the back of whoever happens to be in charge.
And all that unimaginable wealth, it sets the stage for a massive ideological clash. So the Emperor ousts the Harkonnens, who, by the way, had ruthlessly squeezed 10 billion Solaris out of the planet through sheer terror, and he hands it over to House Atreides. But Duke Leto Atreides isn't naive. He knows this gift is actually a trap meant to spark a war. So rather than just mining the spice and keeping the boot on the Fremen's necks, he takes a totally different approach. He plans to survive by forging a real alliance with the locals, aiming to harness what he calls desert power.
But before Paul even sets a single foot on Arrakis, he's forced into a lethal test. A Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother holds a literal poison needle to his neck. She forces him to endure this excruciating pain just to see if his impulses are animal or human. And how does he survive? He conquers his primal terror by repeating this powerful mantra against fear. It's a huge moment, proving he actually might be the prophesied mind capable of bridging space and time, basically the ultimate result of centuries of secretive genetic engineering.
So, they arrive and the trap immediately springs shut. The Atreides are greeted by an absolute nightmare of an environment. We're talking 140-degree heat, sandstorms that move so fast they can literally shear the flesh right off your bones, and, oh yeah, giant 400-meter sandworms hunting them from below. To put that into perspective, that's like 4 entire football fields long. And to make matters worse, the Harkonnens left behind all this crumbling, intentionally sabotaged equipment just to make absolutely sure House Atreides fails their spice quotas.
Faced with all that sabotage, Duke Leto really shows us who he is. There's this intense sequence where equipment totally fails, and a massive sandworm is bearing down on a spice harvester. Leto doesn't even hesitate. He completely abandons a fortune in spice just sitting there in the sand to rescue his crew. He's shouting orders, pulling every single man out, proving his leadership is about human life, not just raking in unimaginable profit.
Unfortunately, honor isn't enough to stop what's coming. The betrayal hits with terrifying speed. In the dead of night, the planetary shields just drop. Comms go totally black. Suddenly, this massive, overwhelming combined force of Harkonnens and the elite Imperial Sardaukar swarm the sleeping city. It is an absolute bloodbath. Within just hours, the Atreides forces are completely massacred, and Duke Leto himself is taken captive.
So who's the architect behind this catastrophic downfall? It's actually their own trusted physician, Dr. Yu. But it's not black and white. His betrayal is incredibly complex, highlighting the universal tragedy of impossible choices. He's basically forced to doom the Duke to save his tortured wife. But at the same time, he leaves Paul and his mother a crucial lifeline by stashing a survival kit in their escape craft. He even gives Leto a poison tooth for one final, venomous strike against his captors. Leto uses it to wipe out the Baron's court, though, spoiler alert, the Baron himself barely manages to float out of harm's way.
Meanwhile, Paul and Jessica flee into the deep desert and take shelter in an old ecological testing tent. It's here, surrounded by the psychoactive spice of the desert, that Paul's mind just fractures wide open. He is completely paralyzed by these intense visions of a violent, unstoppable holy war spreading across the universe, and it's all in his father's name. The terrifying realization hits him that his entire path was paved by those secretive genetic engineers. He actually lashes out at his mother with this devastating accusation, realizing he's essentially a weapon forged by centuries of manipulation.
Things go from bad to worse when they are discovered by Sardaukar death squads. Paul and Jessica manage to steal an ornithopter and make a totally desperate, almost suicidal choice. With the enemy hot on their tail, they fly directly into a massive Coriolis storm. Paul relies entirely on his newfound prescience, steering straight into winds hitting a staggering 800 kilometers an hour. He cuts the engines and just lets the storm take them. It's a huge gamble, using nature's lethal fury to evade pursuers who are absolutely certain no one could ever survive that.
Against all odds, they survive the storm. But honestly, the true test has just begun. To stay alive out there in the deep desert, they have to completely embrace the Fremen ways. I mean, they strap into these high-efficiency still suits just to cool their bodies and recycle their lost moisture. They have to restrict all their travel strictly to the pitch-black night to avoid the lethal heat of the day. And as they cross into worm territory, they have to adopt this erratic, almost dance-like sandwalk to mimic the natural shifting sounds of the desert. The last thing you want is a rhythmic footstep attracting one of those gargantuan predators. Eventually, they get intercepted by a Fremen tribe led by Stilgar, but sanctuary is definitely not freely given. A skeptical warrior named Jamis refuses to accept them and invokes the Amtal, which is a mandatory trial by combat to the death, absolutely no yielding allowed. Suddenly Paul, this young man who has never taken a human life, is backed into a corner. He's forced into a lethal duel against a highly seasoned desert warrior just to protect himself and his mother.
Paul bests Jamis, and it marks a tragic, absolute point of no return. After the fight, the Fremen actually offer him a chance to be smuggled off-world to safety, but Paul refuses. Looking out at the vast sands, he makes a choice. He embraces his late father's vision, dedicating himself to the treacherous path ahead. He declares that his road leads into the desert, and his true future lies in cultivating that elusive desert power. As Paul and Jessica finally march toward the hidden Fremen siege, Paul realizes that this is truly only the beginning. The seeds of the prophecy have firmly been planted. But here is the massive question we are left with. How will this shattered Duke's son actually rise among the Fremen to ignite the holy war he so desperately fears? And ultimately, how will he upend the cosmic order of the entire universe?